Hello everyone, I'm Bill Baker. I'm a software developer here at BrieBug. I'm currently working a contract with Adam and a couple other guys on the team over at MapQuest. And I went to ng-conf with Adam and Jesse, and I was mostly coming at it from the standpoint of a developer who has been mostly in the Angular.js world, mostly just because that's what my clients needed me to do. So ng-conf was really eye-opening for me because I got to see what the world is evolving into, right? It's like all these little problems that I continuously run into with Angular.js. They've already got this solved in Angular 4, so I'm really anxious to get on a formal Angular 4 project. But I just wanted to show you guys a little bit of the Angular-CLI and some, I built a quick little app here that demonstrates a couple of the key points that I thought were really interesting from Angular-CLI and Angular 4. So just a little background, I put together a Node Express Mongo app and stood that up on a Heroku server. I actually used Express Generator. I don't know if anybody's ever used that before, but it was really cool for just setting up the scaffolding for an Express app. So that's kind of the behind the scenes. And on the front end, I sort of had this fun idea. You know, I'm sure you've all heard about certain airline companies that if you don't volunteer your seat, they tend to just drag you off the plane. So I thought here at BrieBug Airlines, we might come up with a little better way of handling that situation. So what I'm going to do here is run you through this app. If you all want to go through over to our BrieBug repo and download this, and go ahead and do an npm install on it. Hopefully that doesn't crash our internet. But go ahead and get that set up, and then when I finish sort of the live code demo, we can all run it and play with it a little bit. So you guys all got that BrieBug GitHub site? All right, so I basically already set up the app here. What I did was I ran ng new meetup app and executed that, and that is the ng is the Angular CLI, and this basically creates all the scaffolding I need for an Angular 4 application. So I've already done that, and I did it beforehand because it takes a little while to install the packages. So you can see that it's pretty much bare bones. It's got everything that you initially need in an Angular application. It's got your main app component. It's got tests built in. It's all pure scaffolding. So if I actually do an ng-serve, that one's not going to work there. This is what always happens in live code demos. So we're going to build this here.
Can you make those a little bigger?
Yeah. A little better for you guys? All right, so Webpack compiled successfully, and you can see here that we have a bare bones Angular 4 application. So my first step here is going to be moving in and creating our first service. Go ahead and kill this. So I'm going to do ng generate service, and I'm going to call it the bid service. And this was a cool little thing I learned from ng-conf, is that I can actually, using -m -module, assign the module that I want to provide this service in. So you can do it manually, or you can just do it like this. So I'm going to go ahead and declare declare it in my app.module.ts. And you can see it has created our initial scaffolding for this service. If I go over to Visual Studio, you can see, yep, there's the bid service tests and the initial bid service. So in order to save time, I'm going to go over to my repo and I'm going to pull the code that I wrote for this bid service here. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this in. And you can see, you can see that I've added a couple things. I've imported a couple things on top. I've imported HTTP. I've imported observable from RxJS, and I've also imported the map property, as well as Socket.io client. So I've set up on my backend server WebSockets, Socket.io, and this is the WebSocket client that goes on the front end. Here is the URL for the server that I stood up. This is where I instantiate my socket here. And you can see I bring in a private property HTTP into the constructor so that I have access to it. And the first thing that I do is I created a method called getBid. This just gets the initial bid that someone might want to use in order to help them not get kicked off the flight. And what we're doing, a little bit more background on what we're building here. It's a lowest bidder application. So what it's going to do is it's going to allow all the users on the plane to say, hey, name my price, right? We want volunteers to get off this plane. We're going to ask everyone, you know, hey, for $1,300, would you be willing to get off this plane? And then it's going to create an online auction, basically, for finding out who is willing to get off the plane for the cheapest price. So we get our initial bid here. We create a bid observer, and what I've done here is I've created a new observable that watches the new bid event. And every time that the new bid event is fired through the WebSocket, it calls observer.next. And what that's going to do is everything that is subscribing to this observable, it will notify it that there's something been updated, and it will pass the data to those things. The last method here is the save bid. So this is the method that a passenger would use in order to update their bid through the site. You can see here's our map property. We're just mapping the response to JSON, and then emitting another event called save bid, and that notifies my server that there's been a successful save bid occurring. There's probably a little overkill to actually put it on the client side, but it would potentially have given me more flexibility to do things with the data on the client side, so I decided to just drop it in on the client side of things and let the server know, hey, I just successfully saved my bid. So the next thing that we're going to do, we got our service all set up, is we're going to come over and we're going to create our first component. So we're going to do ng-generate component, and we're going to call it the bid component. And you can see there that we've created all of our new properties. And you'll notice that it is updating the app.module. If we go and look at the app.module, you can see we've got both of our bid service and our bid component already in there and already wired up. This is one of my favorite things about the CLI, because I always used to do this stuff manually. And here we go, it's already there for me. I can actually work on functionality. So we've created our bid component here. And this is just our basic scaffolding. So I'm going to go ahead and cheat again and go into my GitHub repo. and copy some code. And drop it into our new application here. So you can see that I've added a couple more things on top. I've added the onDestroy lifecycle hook. I've added subscription from RxJS. And I've imported my bid service here. And created a basic interface for controlling the types of my bid object. It's super simple, right? It's just got the price and the name of the person that is bidding on it. Created a couple private properties here. One thing you'll notice, so the ng-on init, this is where it will, as soon as my bid component is instantiated, it will run this ng-on init. This just allows me to load up everything I want to do as soon as we start up this component. And you can see that we've got, here's our initial get bid call that gets our initial data. And right below it is our get bid subscription. So you can see that I've brought in the bid service and the bid observer, and I'm subscribing to that event. So that observer, this is where I'm actually subscribing to that observer event. And every time that it's updated, it then updates these properties in my component. One thing to notice here is that I am saving off this subscription so that when I call ng-on-destroy, whenever we get rid of this component, we're making sure to clean up those subscriptions, because anybody that's ever worked with an event before, you'll notice occasionally you might be subscribing to that event more times than you want, and things can get messy. So you always want to make sure that you're cleaning up your events. Now, I will note that if you use the async pipe, that actually does this a lot for you. You don't have to necessarily worry about this as much if you're using an async pipe, but I decided to do it this way. And the last thing is our send bid method. This is just what we want to do when we want to save our bid. So the last thing second to last thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring in this HTML that I created so that we actually have something to click on. And you'll notice here this is basically just a form with the ng-submit and send bid method attached to it. We're just using ng-model in order to grab the data from those fields in these input boxes here. We've got our button in order to actually send it. We've got our lowest bid information, and you'll notice that I am piping in the currency filter here. So I do currency, I tell it I want it to be in US dollars, and I want it to be a symbol. The last thing on this is you'll notice the new syntax for ng-if, and it's just a standard condition of things to look for. And I believe the last thing I need to do here to get this app working is go over to app.component.html, get rid of this, and wire up my component. So actually the last step here is to run ng-serve again.
Got some files that weren't saved.
Go ahead and save those off. Now we should be looking good. Loading. Okay. So you'll notice that here's our basic interface. It's not pretty, but we're developers. I'm not at a designer meetup right now. So you'll notice that we've called our database. There are no current bids. And if you guys want to sign on right now and do an ng-serve on this app, you guys can play with this as well. But I'm going to go ahead and say, all right, BrieBug Airlines wants me off the plane. I am willing to give up my seat for $1,300. And you'll notice, hey, lowest bid is $1,300, and passenger with the lowest bid is me. So does anybody else have the app up and running right now?
The install kind of froze up for me.
Uh-oh.
I'll definitely have a bid.
Just got the lowest.
Oh, yeah?
I won't make the cops drag me off.
All right, we got another bidder, and you'll notice that I didn't have to do anything. The WebSocket notified me that there was another lower bidder, and yeah, hey, there we go. We got some action. $199. You'll notice that the message also changed, letting me know that I am no longer the lowest bidder. And then I can come in here and say, you know what, I want to go even less. You guys are dropping way too quick for me. So yeah, there you go. I got the lowest bid. And we could just keep playing with that. It's a really basic WebSocket application. $20, really? You pay $250 for this seat. Cool. Well, do you guys have any questions for me? That's pretty much all there is to the app.
Did you see any other, I don't know, nifty tricks or things to come in the CLI that are not kind of mainstream other than generating components and services and stuff?
The CLI, it's pretty much remained the same. One of the things that I really liked about it, and Adam touched on a little bit, was that I really got the feeling that they're moving towards progressive web applications and making the support for that really easy. It does a lot of the necessary work for the service worker for you. And there's just a lot of things that are built into it that they're moving towards, which that's probably the thing I'm most excited about. And it was also the biggest change, and Adam also said this, was the ng-eject and allowing you to mess with the Webpack build process.
Can you show the WebSocket service part again?
Sure. That was in my bid service here. So here was that bid observer method. And I've created a new observable. Wired up my socket here. And then here is the new bid. And basically, what's happening is my server is notifying, it's firing the new bid event up on the server, and it's scroll up, sure.
So, can you scroll up a little more?
Good. Okay.
Yeah, so to me, what's kind of cool about this, a lot of us have seen Firebase demos, and this is basically doing what Firebase would do without doing Firebase. Okay, so you've got a multi-user system here using Socket.io to basically inform each other that, hey, changes are happening without having to pay for something like Firebase if you don't want to. All this technology exists, and basically by setting up the Socket.io client, now we can start to communicate client to client, much like a chat application, and get notifications when data has been updated. So yeah, I thought that's kind of what you were alluding to. So often, like I say, when we typically see a demo like this, it's using something like Firebase that does a lot of this for you automatically, yet there's a cost for that, literally. You know, a dollar figure for that, versus you can actually write something like this on your own that can rival that, and you have full control over how it operates.
It's a pretty intense use of the web server, though, right?
You know what? I'm not really sure on
500 people, and I think you're going to need a big web server.
You're going to need a bigger web server?
Yeah.
You're going to need a bigger boat?
Well, I'm assuming it's keeping a connection to everybody. It's either faking one or keeping one.
You need a port for every user?
Yes.
Is that
They
what it
have
is?
clusters and things like that, so.
Right, there's definitely ways
That,
to. make
if you
that
get
work.
big enough, then Somewhat Firebase is a good choice. If you're
Good point.
Yeah, but for development, it's fabulous. You're off and running.
Yeah.
And I will say I've used some other applications that do utilize WebSockets, and because one of my first impressions was that on mobile devices WebSockets weren't really practical, but I've found that they've addressed a lot of the performance issues associated with just making that initial connection to the WebSocket on a mobile application, so it's becoming more and more mainstream with your ability to utilize it across many devices.
Sometimes it can actually be less network traffic than if you do a bunch of REST calls, and you also get the other direction. So.
Right, right.
So if you've chosen to do a serverless web application, you close the door on Socket.io. You've got to have a web server.
Yeah, well, that's sort of like things like Firebase. But you need something with like a TCP socket.
Yeah.
I think the other big thing, someone was asking about Angular-CLI and where that's kind of going, was really interesting about Igor talking about literally continuing to break down how the transpiling is happening and looking at continual ways to improve the compilation and tree shaking to get things smaller and smaller and better. So as we get into Angular 4, I think what we're going to see is that our applications are going to become faster and faster. I think what Shannon's going to cover here in a minute around lazy loading. You'll also continue to see like how we can continue to improve the performance of our applications just by carefully planning modules and using lazy loading and the continual improvement of the CLI. So who's been using the CLI for a year now? A couple people? Who's been using it for 6 months? Okay, a few more. How about the last 3 months? Okay, so I can remember a year ago, it took forever to get a build done. And especially when they started bringing Webpack in, they were first starting that process took a very long time. Now I think we can make a change, and even in a fairly good sized system, we can usually get a full build done in about a second, maybe 2. So, and then they're continuing to look at ways to improve that. To me, that's the most exciting part of what's going on with the CLI.
Excellent. Any more questions?
Could you put the GitHub URL up there again?
Sure, no problem.
Make it a little bigger so I can see it.
Yeah, I broke it, sorry. No one can outbid me though.
I tried. What'd you send it to?
Well, nothing. I bid pretty much null.
No.
Yep. Well, I did by accident. I put a string in there and it did that.
Thank you.
Got it.
Was it a swear word?
No, it was like SDF.
Well, hey,
My
I want to
bid
thank
was
everyone
SDF.
for flying BrieBug Airlines and for not having to have me drag you out.
There's a free seat right here.
All right, so next up we've got Shannon, and he's actually going to take the app that I just built and make it even more awesome. So here he is, Shannon.